Have you ever noticed that the harder you try to be happy, the more it slips through your fingers? You plan the perfect evening, buy yourself something you've wanted for weeks, or even go on vacation telling yourself, "This time I will feel joy." And yet, somewhere in the middle of it, you catch yourself feeling restless, disappointed, or even guilty because the happiness you expected isn't there in the way you imagined. It's almost as if chasing happiness directly makes it vanish. That is the paradox we're going to explore today. Why the pursuit of happiness can actually make you less happy, and what you can do to approach joy in a more sustainable way. This isn't about giving up on happiness. It's about understanding how your mind works so that you can stop sabotaging yourself in the chase for joy. Psychologists call this phenomenon the hedonic paradox. It's a bit like trying to fall asleep. The more you think, "I have to sleep now," the more awake you feel. In the same way, the more you think, "I have to be happy now," the more pressure and expectation you create, and the less happy you become. Your brain interprets happiness as a goal to be achieved, like finishing a project or buying a product. But happiness is not a trophy you can grab. It's more like a shadow that follows you when you're focused on something else. The irony is that the more you obsess over catching it, the further away it seems to move. One reason this happens is because of something called affective forecasting. That's the brain's tendency to overestimate how much joy or disappointment you'll feel in the future. You imagine that getting a promotion, buying a new car, or going to a concert will bring massive, long-lasting happiness. And yes, those things might feel great in the moment, but research shows that people adapt very quickly. Psychologists call it hedonic adaptation, the natural tendency to return to a baseline level of happiness no matter what positive or negative events occur. You've probably experienced this. The excitement of a new gadget fades after a week. The joy of moving into a new apartment becomes the normal background of your life after a month. Even the high of falling in love, which can feel overwhelming, eventually levels out as the relationship becomes familiar. Your brain is wired to normalize. That's good for survival, but frustrating when you're trying to hold on to joy. Another reason the pursuit of happiness backfires is because it creates constant comparison. If you're telling yourself you should be happy, every moment becomes a test. Am I happy enough? Am I happier than my friends? Am I happier than I was yesterday? The very act of measuring and comparing makes you focus on what's missing instead of what's present. Imagine trying to enjoy a meal while constantly checking if it tastes as good as the last one you ate, or as good as your friend's plate. That mental habit drains the pleasure out of the experience. This is why chasing happiness as a goal can turn into a form of dissatisfaction. It makes you hyper-aware of every dip in mood, every moment of boredom, every instance where reality doesn't match your expectation. So why does the brain fall into this trap? Because evolution didn't design it to make you happy. It designed it to keep you alive. Your brain is constantly scanning for threats, problems, and opportunities. That means it pays more attention to what's missing than to what's already there. This is called the negativity bias, and it's the reason you can receive 10 compliments and 1 criticism, and only the criticism sticks in your mind. The brain assumes that focusing on problems will increase your chances of survival. But in the modern world, where most of us aren't fighting predators daily, this mechanism ends up turning against us. It creates a cycle where you're always reaching for the next thing, convinced that happiness lies just beyond your current situation, while ignoring the contentment that could be found right here. Let's bring in a metaphor. Imagine you're holding a butterfly in your hands. If you gently cup your palms, the butterfly can rest there peacefully. But if you squeeze, desperate to hold on, you crush it. Happiness works the same way. The harder you grip, the more fragile it becomes. But when you create the right conditions, patience, space, balance, it can land on you naturally. This is not just poetic, it's backed by research. Studies show that people who focus less on being happy and more on living with purpose, building relationships, or engaging in meaningful activities report higher levels of well-being over time. So what can you do to step out of this paradox and find a more reliable form of happiness? The first tool is reframing your relationship with happiness. Instead of seeing it as a prize to be earned, see it as a byproduct. Just as exercise creates fitness as a side effect, meaningful actions create happiness as a side effect. If you make happiness the end goal, you'll stumble. But if you make growth, connection, or contribution the goal, happiness follows naturally. For example, instead of saying, "I want to be happy at work," you could say, "I want to do work that challenges me and helps others." Instead of saying, "I want to be happy in my relationship," you could say, "I want to be present and caring with my partner." Notice how this shift takes the pressure off. Happiness is no longer something you have to force. It becomes something you receive along the way. The second tool is practicing what psychologists call experiential acceptance. That means allowing yourself to feel all emotions, not just the positive ones. When you stop resisting sadness, boredom, or anxiety, they lose their power to control you. The paradox of emotions is that the more you fight them, the stronger they become. If you tell yourself, "I must not feel sad," you add guilt and frustration on top of the sadness. But if you allow yourself to feel sad without judgment, the emotion often passes more quickly. This is why mindfulness practices are so effective. They teach you to observe your emotions like passing clouds rather than problems to solve. And when you stop chasing only good emotions, you make room for authentic happiness to arise. The third tool is gratitude, but not in the superficial sense of making a list and forcing yourself to feel thankful. Real gratitude is about shifting attention from what's missing to what's present. Remember, your brain is biased toward lack. Gratitude retrains your attention to see abundance. Think of it like changing the lens on a camera. Without changing the scene, the focus shifts, and suddenly you notice details you were blind to before. You might still have problems, but you also have supportive people, small joys, and moments of beauty that your brain was ignoring. This is not about denying reality, but about balancing your perception. And over time, this practice reduces the restless need to chase more, because you realize that much of what you want is already here. Finally, there's the practice of aligning with values instead of moods. If you let happiness dictate your actions, you'll always be at the mercy of fleeting emotions. But if you let your values guide your actions, you create stability. For instance, if one of your values is health, you'll go to the gym even when you don't feel like it. If one of your values is kindness, you'll help a friend even when you're not in a good mood. Living by values anchors you in something deeper than emotion. And ironically, this steady foundation makes joy more accessible. Because instead of asking, "Am I happy right now?" you can ask, "Am I living in alignment with what matters to me?" That question leads to a richer, more grounded life, where happiness comes as a companion rather than a goal. So far, we've explored why happiness slips away when you chase it, and what principles can help you reframe your approach. But you might still be wondering, how do you actually apply this in your daily routine, in a practical way that sticks? That's exactly what we'll unpack next, because understanding the paradox is only the first step. The real change comes from small, consistent shifts in the way you live your days, so that joy stops being a finish line and becomes the ground you walk on. So let's turn the theory into practice. The first practical step is to remove the pressure to feel happy all the time. This may sound counterintuitive, but the simple act of dropping the demand for happiness makes room for it to show up. You can start by noticing how often you use happiness as a measurement stick in your daily life. Do you find yourself asking, "Am I happy enough today?" Instead of interrogating yourself, try shifting the question to, "Am I engaged in something meaningful right now?" That question reduces the pressure and puts your focus on what's within your control. The second practice is to cultivate micro moments of presence. Happiness is often imagined as a peak state, something grand and continuous. But in reality, it is experienced in brief, often ordinary moments. The warmth of sunlight on your skin, the taste of food when you slow down to notice it, the laughter in a casual conversation. These moments don't require you to chase anything. They only require you to pay attention. A simple exercise is to pick one daily activity, like drinking your morning coffee or brushing your teeth, and commit to being fully present for it without multitasking. Over time, this practice rewires your brain to notice joy in the ordinary, which is far more sustainable than chasing extraordinary highs. The third practice is to reframe setbacks. A big reason people feel unhappy is that they expect life to be a smooth curve upward. But happiness doesn't mean the absence of difficulty. It means the capacity to hold difficulty in perspective. When something goes wrong, instead of telling yourself, "This ruins my happiness," you can say, "This is part of the bigger picture, and I can still find meaning or growth in it." Philosophical traditions like Stoicism and Buddhism have long taught this principle. The Stoics emphasized focusing only on what is within your control, while Buddhists spoke about the inevitability of suffering, but also about the possibility of liberation through acceptance. Both perspectives point to the same truth. Chasing permanent pleasure is futile, but cultivating resilience leads to a deeper, steadier form of contentment. Another important tool is the practice of contribution. Research consistently shows that people who give, whether it's their time, attention, or resources, experience higher levels of life satisfaction. Why? Because giving pulls you out of the endless loop of self-focus and connects you to something larger. It's easy to become trapped in the mindset of, what will make me happy? But that question itself reinforces the paradox, because it keeps your attention on yourself as an object to be satisfied. Contribution flips the frame. How can I make a positive impact right now? The act of helping others, showing kindness, or supporting a cause generates a kind of fulfillment that isn't dependent on constant emotional highs. Let's talk about another powerful but often overlooked practice: detachment from outcomes. Imagine planting a seed. If you dig it up every day to check if it's growing, you'll stunt its growth. But if you water it, give it sunlight, and trust the process, it will naturally sprout. In the same way, when you cling too tightly to a desired emotional outcome, like, I must feel joy today, you suffocate the possibility of that joy emerging. By focusing instead on actions aligned with your values and trusting that emotions will follow in their own rhythm, you create the space for happiness to arise naturally. Detachment doesn't mean indifference, it means choosing patience over desperation. Now let's address a very modern obstacle: social comparison fueled by social media. The pursuit of happiness becomes especially toxic when it's measured against curated images of other people's lives. Every scroll through your feed is a reminder of what you should be doing to feel happy: traveling, partying, succeeding, smiling. The paradox intensifies here because the more you compare, the more inadequate your own happiness feels, even if your life is perfectly fine. A practical antidote is what psychologists call digital minimalism, intentionally limiting your exposure to comparison triggers. You might designate screen-free hours or unfollow accounts that leave you feeling worse. By doing so, you reduce the artificial benchmarks that distort your sense of contentment. Another practice worth adopting is the shift from pleasure to meaning. Pleasure is short-term and often leaves you chasing more, while meaning provides a long-lasting sense of fulfillment. You might not feel happy while training for a marathon, raising a child, or building a career, because these processes are demanding, but they often deliver a deeper satisfaction than fleeting pleasures. By asking yourself, what makes my life feel meaningful, rather than what makes me happy right now, you align with a more reliable source of well-being. Studies show that people who prioritize meaning over pleasure report higher overall life satisfaction, even if they experience more stress in the short term. This reveals a hidden truth. Happiness is not about maximizing comfort, but about aligning your life with purpose. It's also important to practice self-compassion. Many people become unhappy not because they lack joy, but because they criticize themselves for not being happy enough. This creates a second layer of suffering, pain about the absence of happiness. Self-compassion interrupts this cycle. Instead of saying, "What's wrong with me that I'm not happy?" you can say, "It's okay to feel this way. Happiness comes and goes, and that doesn't make me broken." This gentle approach reduces the pressure and paradoxically makes space for authentic joy to return. Self-compassion works like a psychological reset button. It calms the nervous system and lowers the internal resistance that often blocks positive emotions. Let's return to the butterfly metaphor. You don't catch happiness by chasing it with a net. You create a garden where it wants to land. Your garden is made of practices: presence, gratitude, contribution, meaning, and self-compassion. Each practice reduces the pressure to be happy and instead builds a life where joy emerges naturally. And when you live this way, happiness stops being a fragile emotion you're desperate to hold on to. It becomes a background state, a steady sense of contentment that can carry you even through challenges. So here's the reframe. Happiness is not something you pursue, it's something you cultivate. And the paradox of happiness is resolved not by chasing it harder, but by turning your attention toward living fully, aligning with values, and creating the conditions for joy to arise on its own. In that sense, the pursuit of happiness is like chasing a rainbow, while cultivating meaning is like planting a tree. One leaves you running in circles, while the other grows into something that sustains you for years to come. If this exploration helped you see happiness in a new light and gave you practical tools to step out of the paradox, I invite you to carry it forward. Like this video if it resonated with you, share it with someone who might also be caught in the chase for happiness, and subscribe to Mind Unlocked. Together, we'll keep turning psychology and philosophy into practical wisdom, a toolkit for better thinking, so you can live with more clarity, resilience, and meaning.